The CBC and their kingdom of secrets, that's the topic of tonight's byline. When it comes to the battle of the ideas, CBC has lost the fight to keep their secrets under wraps. The public just doesn't back them. I've been writing about the state broadcaster and their refusal to release documents to the public for some time now. In that time, we've exposed that CBC has refused to tell the public how much absenteeism costs them each year, how much they spend to maintain taxpayer-funded buildings out of which they operate, and even how much their executives have spent on travel and hospitality. Now a poll from Abacus data shows that an overwhelming majority believe the state broadcaster should be disclosing details on spending. The CBC has already lost this battle at the federal court level, with the judge telling them to hand over documents for examination to the Federal Information Commissioner. Instead of complying, they refused. They appealed the decision. The Abacus poll shows that 64% feel it is wrong for the government-owned broadcaster to spend tax dollars to fight this case in court. Among backers of the Conservative government, 77% felt the appeal is wrong. A majority of NDP, Liberal and Bloc voters also say CBC should drop the appeal. A parliamentary committee tried to make this point to top brass at CBC earlier this year. Sean Murphy, a Liberal MP, tried to get CBC President Hubert Lacroix to see the foolishness of a government-owned broadcaster spending tax dollars to fight the Information Commissioner, a federal officer of Parliament, in federal court. Taxpayers, he pointed out, just might not like this. Well, too bad was the reply. Hubert Lacroix had this to say.
We believe that only a judge should have the right to demand the disclosure of information that relates to our creative activities or is journalistic or program related.
We may pay the bills, but as far as Lacroix is concerned, we don't count for squat. In Hubie's eyes, not even the MPs who vote for the $1.1 billion taxpayer subsidy that keeps his tushy-cushy can get a peek at what CBC spends its money on. When Parliament made the state broadcaster subject to the Access to Information Act in 2007, they gave them an exemption to cover their programming, creative and journalistic practices. The idea was that competitors, the ones using their own money to go up against the billion-dollar giant that is the CBC, shouldn't be able to use the Access to Information system to get a look at company secrets. Let's just say they've taken that exemption to the extreme. Anything that touches on a show, including executive spending, has been deemed off limits at one time or another by the CBC. If the public had their way, everything from salaries to what is paid for the rights to popular American movies, well, it would all be public. According to the same Abacus poll, 59% of Canadians surveyed think everything but journalistic sources should be made public. This is the way it should be. Instead, they claim exemption after exemption, even going so far as to claim that some data cannot be released because it would be injurious to the economic interests of Canada to do so. We all pay for the CBC. We should all know where that money goes. And that's the byline. And joining us with more on the poll and what the numbers mean, the man behind the poll himself, Dr. David Coletto, our pollster extraordinaire. Dr. David Coletto, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Brian.
The poll, did it surprise you that the majority was as strong as it is? Because it's a pretty healthy majority. 64% say don't use the tax dollars. 59% say everything should be out there but journalistic sources. Those are pretty healthy majorities.
Yeah, on the first question about whether the CBC is right or wrong to use taxpayer money to fight the Information Commissioner in court, I wasn't surprised. I think that's an issue where, you ask a random person on the street, you're 10 random people on the street, you're going to get the results we found in this poll, and that is, it just doesn't make any sense, right? We've been told time and time again that we believe in accountability. We want accountability, we want transparency, and the public demands that. And I think our results suggest that if you're a conservative, if you're a New Democrat, if you're a Liberal, if you're a man or a woman, any age group, we believe that first, that the CBC should disclose information. The 59% believe that. And then even further the point, even if they don't disclose it, but they're asked to do so by an independent commissioner of Parliament, they shouldn't be taking that person to court using taxpayer money to do so. So it's a really interesting, but yet I don't think surprising result, because it suggests the CBC is clearly on the wrong side here of the public.
Now, when you look at this, I say 64% say that they shouldn't be fighting this in court. You might say, oh, well, 36% say they should be fighting it in court. So that's close to a third, but that's not it. Only 10% actually back them, and 26% don't have a clue.
Exactly. A very small sliver of the public says, yeah, the CBC was right. And we know that these are, there's not one particular group that's overwhelmingly siding with the CBC. There's small groups of men and women. Again, it crosses all boundaries. I would count these as sort of the diehards. Those are those, the CBC can do no wrong. I listen to CBC radio. I watch CBC TV over and over again. And they're the defenders of the CBC. Everybody else, as you said, the other 26% don't know where they stand. And then there's the 64% who say it's the wrong thing to do. So
now, and similar on the question where you asked about whether what should be released, the majority were saying that there was only a few who said it shouldn't be any, like 2%. 2 to 3% said they shouldn't be releasing anything. And I made this point earlier today. It's got to be tough because CBC has a lot of reporters that do good work in using the access to information system, and they'll dig up some nugget of a story. And then they call on the government to be accountable. And then they find out that their employer is the worst in terms of not wanting to release anything. It's got to be difficult for them. So very few people actually support them in not releasing anything.
Exactly. Like, as you said, 2% nationally, and no group gets above 4%. So that group is in the very small minority. What's interesting, though, is the 59% who want full disclosure except for journalistic sources. I think Canadians recognize, that's why we put it in this poll, that when it comes to reporting, as you're a journalist, you would understand, if you have a source, you're not going to disclose it because maybe you have an exclusive or things like that. But when it comes to how the CBC operates, we're not criticizing, I don't think Canadians are criticizing the journalists in this poll. They're criticizing the executives who are making these decisions not to disclose this information. What they're saying is, look, we're the taxpayers. We are not necessarily the Board of Governors of the CBC, but we hold the Board of Governors, the Government of Canada, accountable. And it would be like, the shareholders of a publicly traded company not being able to see information, or the Board of Directors not being able to see information. You mentioned that Liberal MP who asked for information, and the CBC CEO refused. I think Canadians, shake their heads and say, wait, if we're funding this, we have a right to see the information, and that's what we're getting loud and clear in the poll. All
right. David Coletto, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
And send us your thoughts on this. What do you think about the poll? What do you think about CBC's practices? Byline at sunmedia.ca. Don't go away. Lots more Byline coming up.